Now to Iran, and the use of the death penalty around the world is exploding. The number of people executed last year spiked to its highest level for 5 years, according to Amnesty International. The human rights group's annual report on the use of capital punishment found China continuing to execute thousands of its citizens every year, though authorities do not disclose official data. The world's second biggest executioner is Iran. And since the death of a young woman in police custody had triggered mass protests last year, executions there have increased sharply.
No more executions. That's what Iranians are demanding on the streets these days. And in front of prisons like this one in Isfahan, where 3 young men are at risk of imminent execution. Majid Kazemi, Saleh Mir Hashemi and Said Yacoubi were arrested and sentenced to death for allegedly being part of an armed attack against security forces back in November. Charges that were completely made up, Majid says in a rare message to his family from prison.
I told them I had nothing to do with it, but under torture I had to make a confession. I never had any weapons, but under torture I had to confess that I'm a gun owner. They kept beating me to make me tell their version of the crime on camera. They tortured me and said you have to say this on camera. I had to confess everything under torture. I didn't have any weapons and I never did anything wrong.
That's why his cousin Amir here in Germany is working day and night to draw public attention to the case, much to the Islamic Republic's displeasure.
They told us the boys could be executed faster if we speak to the media. Every day this fear accompanies us.
But Amir knows the Iranian judiciary is more likely to kill Majid and the others if no one is watching, and so he's refusing to stay silent. And he's not alone. A member of the German parliament has taken on the role of political sponsor for Majid.
We are the voice of the protesters in the Western world to make it clear that human rights are being violated there. Majid could hardly walk when the sentence was handed down because he'd been tortured in custody. It's unimaginable. It's cruel. It's our job to be even louder, and I'm not going to stop being loud so that people like Majid have a voice in the Western world.
Support Amir and his family are thankful for. The constant fear for Majid's life has taken a heavy toll on them.
For the last few days, I've been thinking all the time, why were we born in the Middle East? In Iran in the first place? Why do we have to endure so much pain? Why do we have to be afraid to live or to show ourselves as we are? I'm not well because of our children. I'm not well at all because of our children. Constantly stressed, constantly anxious, constantly worried about hearing bad news. Hope is the only thing we have left.
Hope that his cousin Majid Kazemi will live, along with all the other political prisoners. And hope that his country one day will be free.
Well, Raha Bahreini is a human rights lawyer and Iran researcher at Amnesty International. Welcome to DW. Your report talks about an 80% increase in executions in Iran last year. How much of that is linked to the anti-government protests sparked by the death in police custody of Jina Mahsa Amini?
This staggering spike in the number of executions is linked to the Iranian authorities' strategy of using the death penalty as a tool of repression. The Iranian authorities have a long-standing record of increasing executions in the country whenever they want to instill fear among the population and crush unrest and protests. The majority of the executions in 2022 were carried out for murder and drug-related offenses. However, we believe that it is still in connection with this climate of fear and repression that the Iranian authorities want to generate.
OK, but again, how much of that is down to the protests that were caused by the death in custody of Jina Amini? Iran is not known for its... Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so as we speak, there are dozens of protesters who are at risk of being sentenced to death and executed in connection with their involvement in the protest. In 2022, we had the execution of 2 protesters in connection with the protest after grossly unfair trials that relied on confessions that were obtained under torture and other ill treatment. As you also mentioned in your report, as we speak, 3 men in Isfahan are at imminent risk of execution, also for their involvement in the nationwide uprisings of last year. We also have 6 political dissidents in Khuzestan province from the oppressed Arab minority who are at risk of execution. I must also note, though, that we have this increase in the use of the death penalty for drug-related offenses. These executions do not attract the condemnation of the international community in the way they should, when in reality, the majority of the people executed are from oppressed minorities, and the use of the death penalty for drug-related offenses is absolutely prohibited under international law. It is absolutely
let me just interrupt you there. So, because I'm finding it hard to understand why. So you're saying that the death penalty is being used to intimidate people, and it's being used against minorities, especially in drugs cases. Why? Where is the link between drugs and minorities and the death penalty? Explain that to us.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the communities who are involved in drug-related activities come from oppressed minorities, including the Baluchi minority. And the Iranian authorities impose the death penalty for minor drug-related offenses, such as carrying certain amounts of drug. Under international law, the use of the death penalty for drug-related offenses is absolutely prohibited under all circumstances. And year after year, we've seen the use of the death penalty for minor drug-related offenses in Iran. Baluchi minority, which is the oppressed minority in southeastern Iran, has borne the brunt of this deadly anti-narcotics policy.
OK, again, let me interrupt you there, because we're going over ground that you've already covered. So would it be your contention that Iran doesn't impose the death penalty for drug use from people who are not from these minorities?
The minorities have disproportionately been affected by the Iranian authorities' use of the death penalty. We have, however, had the use of the death penalty for drug-related offenses in other parts of the country as well. Overall, in 2020, at least 255 people were executed for drug-related offenses across the country. This is a massive increase from the 23 people who were executed in 2020 for drug-related offenses. This increase in the use of the death penalty is linked to this climate of fear and intimidation that the Iranian authorities want to generate. It is costly for the Iranian authorities to execute protesters, but when they execute impoverished people from oppressed minorities or for minor drug-related offenses, they can generate a climate of intimidation, and at the same time, they do not attract the
We've got that. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Raha Bahreini from Amnesty International.